Good afternoon to lovers of philosophy. My name is A.P. Fabian. It is my privilege and pleasure alike to welcome you all on behalf of the India International Center in New Delhi, where the temperature is slightly above 30 degrees Celsius. The IIC's program division head, Tete, who brought us all together in cyberspace, is with us. Thank you, Tete, though you tenaciously choose to be invisible. Now, our theme is Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy, its relevance to the contemporary world. The title has been chosen with some care and after deliberation between our distinguished speaker, Professor K.P. Shankaran, and the IIC. A growing number of fellow human beings, including fellow Indians, have argued that Gandhi's nonviolence worked against the British, as they, the British, were essentially decent people, susceptible to appeals based on morality. Would it have worked against Hitler? Would it work today, whether in India or elsewhere in this troubled world, in this post 9/11 world? In this context, permit me to share a concern. I do mock interviews the civil month. In August, I asked a candidate hailing from Mumbai to say 4 or 5 sentences on the Quit India movement. Well, he failed to mention Mahatma Gandhi. On being asked, he said that nobody had told him of Gandhi in that context, nor has he read it at school or college. Dear lovers of philosophy, do note that a generation is growing up without reasonable knowledge of or interest in history. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed fortunate to have Professor K.P. Shankaran joining us from Kochi. The very name takes us to Adi Shankara, the prince among philosophers. Adi Shankara was born in Kaladi, Angamali, very close to Kochi. Professor Shankaran taught philosophy at St. Stephen's College, Delhi. He has been sharing his thoughts on Gandhi's philosophy through the Indian Express, The Wire, and elsewhere. Now, to my mind, only a philosopher can tell us where we as humanity are going, and even more important, where we should be going. We live in a world, alas, where we know more and more of the less and less. In 1939, as Mahatma Gandhi turned 70, Albert Einstein wrote, I quote, generations to come, it may well be, will scarce believe that such a man as this one, ever in flesh and blood, walked upon this earth. Now, a word about the format. After Professor Shankaran's address, I will raise a few questions with him. Meanwhile, you may kindly use the chat box to send in your questions. The IIC considers the interactive part of any program as really, really important. Let us, ladies and gentlemen, request Professor Shankaran to address us. Over to you, Professor Shankaran.
Good evening, friends. Let me first thank Ambassador Fabian and the IIC for inviting me for this online discussion. I begin today's conversation by saying something about Gandhi's philosophy, which I hope will provide a background for our discussion. But this will be a very, very brief talk. Philosophy, as we know, initially came to be practiced only in three civilizations: the Chinese, Greek, and Indian. In these civilizations, philosophy functioned as a way of life distinct from other ways of life that were rooted in belief in supernatural powers, otherwise religious cultic ways of life. But even the philosophical way of life practiced in those ancient times could be divided into two categories: a metaphysics-led philosophical way of life and an ethics-led philosophical way of life. The basic difference between these ways of life that in ethics-led philosophy, the attempt is to transform the practitioner from her baser state of being into an ethically higher state of existence. In the process, making her psychologically self-sufficient. However, in the metaphysics-led philosophical way of life, instead of higher ethical state of being, the philosopher tries to achieve an enhanced state of understanding or insight, as well as communion with what is taken to be the ultimate. In ethical in metaphysics-led philosophical way of life, ethics has only a secondary role to play. In the 20th century, Gandhi reinvented a very original ethics-led philosophical way of life. People generally refer to this as the Gandhian way of life. But most of us normally think of Gandhi as a religious person who just strayed into politics. The reason I think is that after Christianity banned all Greco-Roman philosophical ways of life in Europe in 6th century CE, philosophy re-emerged in Europe only in 17th century. This time as purely theoretical discipline. With the idea of philosophical way of life became extinct in Europe. It has also witnessed the emergence of modern philosophy as purely a theoretical discipline. By the end of 18th century, philosophy had become an academic discipline with only academics functioning in philosophy departments being treated as philosophers. With the colonization, these European ideas started influencing public discourse in the rest of the world. Viewed against these standards, Gandhi did not qualify as philosopher. It was therefore not surprising that to the people at large, it was only Gandhi's political dimension that became visible. The ethical dimension and associated way of life got subsumed under the category of religion. But Gandhi was not a religious person, even though he constantly used Vaishnava vocabulary. Nevertheless, he was spiritual. His spirituality means reduction of self-centeredness. This is clear from his introduction to his translation of Gita called Anasakti Yoga. In 1929, his shift from God is truth into truth is God is also aimed at making ethics the first principle of his philosophy. A, a precursor to this can be seen in his 1927 free translation of Salter's Ethical Religion, when he said, quote, morality should be observed as religion. Like the Buddha, Gandhi believed the reduction of selfishness was crucial. It was only then that the Krishna would develop a concern for the well-being of all means Sarvodaya, and in the process gain psychological self-sufficiency. Once psychological self-sufficiency is fully attained, it would cause all fears to disappear. If the Buddha called this state nirvana, Gandhi referred to it as moksha. But Gandhi's philosophical practice has a political dimension, which is what made Gandhi different from the Buddha. Apart from individual moksha, Gandhi wanted to enhance the freedoms of the people at large. To achieve this, to achieve this purpose, Gandhi conceived a stateless federation of interconnected but sufficiently independent communes, which he called Swaraj. Gandhi described himself as an enlightened anarchist, as we can we can name his political dimension of his ethics-led philosophical way of life, either as a pacifist anarchism or as enlightened anarchy. I think this much is enough to provide the background for our discussion. Over to you, Professor Fabian.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran, for that, what shall I say? What a rich class, that you have given us. Unique class. We learned so much about philosophy and history from you, and it certainly was a study in brevity, lucidity, and comprehensiveness.
Yeah, I didn't get the last part of it.
I was saying that it was a study, what your class, which you have given us, lecture that you have given us, is a study in brevity, lucidity, and at the same time, it was comprehensive. You have packed into a few minutes so much. Thank you so much. Now, Mr. Shankaran, if you permit, I may pose a few questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. And for the sake of, budgeting the time, I will pose two questions at the same time, which you may like to answer one after the other. The first question is on the quality of India's democracy. How the parliament is functioning and why MLAs are being bought or selling themselves. So that is the first question. And the second question is about the treatment of minorities. We read about a bangle seller in UP. We all know what happened to him. We read about a church in Delhi being demolished. So we want to ask you how minorities are being treated. In fact, if I may phrase it, how Gandhi would have responded to these questions. Thank you, Professor Shankar.
Thank you. Let me start by referring to Gandhi's Hind Swaraj. Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, that is 1909 text, tells us that British state and its parliament are organs of a satanic civilization. Gandhi took that phrase, satanic civilization, seriously. And what he meant by that, the industrial capitalism. And he thought that the nation state and uh, parliamentary democracy are organs of this satanic civilization. So he advised, and the text advises India not to adopt such an organs of that kind of a civilization which he called satanic. He thought that if we adopt these, India would also become like that satanic civilization. But India simply rejected Gandhi's advice and became a nation state with parliamentary democracy. I believe that Gandhi's prediction has come true. The Indian democratic practice, as Amartya Sen said, has failed miserably. Consider these facts. The current Lok Sabha nearly has 50% MPs with criminal records. Almost 50% MPs with criminal records. And these are the people sitting and giving us or deciding the bills and all that. Beginning with that, let us look at the criminality of Indian state. Beginning with the Hyderabad police action in 1948, in which thousands of innocent Muslims were killed with the backing of Indian Army. This information concealed from us for a long time. And we came to know about it only past, say, about 20, 25 years ago. And the Hindus Friendline published that, and also there is a book on this, and BBC published the data. And according to BBC, it is nearly 60,000 odd Muslims were killed in that operation. This is one of the facts of India, which Gandhi would have really regretted that he did something for Indian independence. Then look at what happened in 1984, the anti-Sikh violence, massacre. The party involved in that atrocity got elected with a thumping majority, and the leader of that party went on to become the prime minister. That the people involved in that massacre are not punished; they actually are rewarded. And then look at the other massacre, the absolutely diabolical Gujarat massacre of 2002 happened under the watch of the current Prime Minister of India. And in Gujarat, after the massacre, he became Chief Minister, I think 3 or 4 times. Then he got elected as the Prime Minister. And recently, look at the condition of Indian democracy. Look at the condition of Indian democracy. Look at the criminality of Indian state. Recently, a union minister threatened his opponents by screaming publicly, "Goli maro salon ko." Instead of being shown the door for such an outrageous behavior, he was rewarded with higher cabinet rank. This is not an isolated case. There are many such instances. Recently, I don't know what he expressed, that Chief Minister Yogi was harassing Muslims. I forget that particular statement he made. There are signs of rotten, illiberal, most dangerous democracy. Moreover, in the multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society like India, representative democracy has the inherent propensity to generate vote banks. It is inevitable that in such societies, different groups would vote for parties, candidates who they think are most likely to protect their interests. This tendency is, as the logic of the system demands, exploited by all political parties. This is what you have here. Indian democracy is not a liberal democracy. It is actually a very, very violent democracy. What is good about India is that the procedural part of the democracy is after every 5 years, after every 2 years, state level elections are conducted reasonably organized way. In these polling booths now, there are no violence, etc. But the people elect 50% of the parliamentarians who are with criminal records, and chief ministers and leaders of parties involved in massacres are elected as prime ministers. And what do you think about a democracy of this kind? The conducting elections regularly doesn't mean the democracy, the liberal, it doesn't mean that it's a liberal democracy. If you look at the peace index, then you realize that India is somewhere in the rock bottom. It is one of the violent states in the world. And all this you have to keep in mind. It is now this tendency, what happened that this tendency is exploited by the Hindutva movement. Its ascendancy, that is feeding on this tendency to create vote banks, is now threatening to convert Indian representative democracy into a majoritarian democracy. The Hindutva movement is poised to create a unified Hindu religious group and consolidated Hindu vote bank. In the next parliamentary election, the fate of India would be sealed quickly and decisively if the Hindu parties are returned to power again. This is the condition of India is going to become a majoritarian democracy. And this is the condition. Gandhiji knew about it, and that is what he said, that if India adopts the European model of state, nation state, and also parliamentary democracy, India would also become what he called the satanic civilization. I think India has already become a satanic civilization. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. You have spoken with commendable transparency. Now, let's move to another question, that is about the Rohingyas. We all know why they came to India. How would Gandhi have responded to thousands of them coming to India seeking refuge and protection?
No, India will not. See, now you have already seen the responses of Home Minister of India, and here there is a tendency, clear tendency to target the minorities, that is particularly Muslims. That Gandhi tried to get Hindus and Muslims together. Now, the present regime trying to divide Hindus and Muslims. Now, consider the schemes like CAA and NRC. These are to divide. So what is the chance of Rohingyas coming to India? This government would allow them to come. This is largely because the policy they self-consciously adopted. That policy, Rohingyas are Muslims. So Rohingyas cannot come to India and settle India. And mercilessly, they will be thrown out from India. And that is what I said, that India has joined, the moment India has adopted the idea of nation state and the parliamentary democracy, India has joined with the global satanic civilization called industrial capitalism. And India is just simply participating in that massacre, which has happened in Iraq, which has happened in various other parts of India, world wars and Korean War, Vietnam War, all that part of that violent, what you call satanic civilizations activity, and India is part of it. India would mercilessly throw Rohingyas out of India.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. If I may, the next question is about Gandhi's famous talisman. Now, to what extent India has remembered Gandhi's famous talisman given to us well, a few weeks before he was assassinated?
So, Ambassador, we have to consider the state of the poor of this country. Now, nearly according to data that I have, now I looked at one article written by K.P. Kannan, and according to Kannan's version, 80% of Indians are poor, not below poverty line, they're poor. And the Indian middle class is about 300 million perhaps. But there is a huge population between the lower middle class. Lower middle class is actually constituted by maids and brahmacharis and all. They are poor. And there's a huge population below that. And just above the 30% or 25-30%, the below poverty line people. Even if Kannan's, K.P. Kannan's position is not acceptable, it is not 80%, but it will be nearly somewhere around 60 to 70% Indians are poor. And that is what this government, serious, it's not only this government, all the governments rule India, all the parties rules India, which created a situation where a larger number of people, or nearly more than 60% of people, are poor. Now, India would not, the government of India will never accept it. They try to conceal this fact. And now, China last year said that 50% of Chinese population have only 10,000, equivalent to 10,000 rupees. Now, Indian government will never admit anything like that. They conceal the thing. That is what I said, what Gandhi said, you have to wipe, whatever happens, you have to see that the poor people will never be, your policies will not create any problem for the poor people. That is not India's attitude. India does not have any great concern for India's poor.
Thank you, Professor. Turning to international questions, what would have Gandhiji advised the Security Council about Afghanistan? I mean, talking to the Taliban. He will not recognize it, but talking to the Taliban and giving urgent humanitarian assistance to the millions of Afghans. 38 million is the population, and there is a high risk of so many of them dying without food and medicine.
I didn't get that question properly. Could you please repeat?
Okay,
that?
I will repeat. If we may now take on one or two international questions. One is Afghanistan.
Yeah.
What would have been the advice of Mahatma Gandhi to the Security Council about dealing with the Taliban, who have taken over power by violence? Would Gandhi have advised them, recognition may or may not be a different matter, but do talk to them and send urgent humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan without losing time over a debate about recognition? Would he have done that, or what do you think?
It's a difficult kind of a question that, Gandhi, the world which controlled by the world powers like America, Britain, and France. These are the world powers, and they are, from Gandhi's point of view, are advanced, uh, uh, very much advanced in all sort of criminalities. They exploited the world, and they tried to get more and more resources from other countries, so petrol and other things. And they're constantly creating war and difficulties all over the world. And the Afghan problem, you won't be able to handle that problem, in the sense that they themselves created the Afghan problem by producing Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda was created by America in order to throw Soviet Union out. And a situation of that kind, what advice Gandhi could give? I don't think Gandhi could give any particular advice to anybody. And even if Gandhi advised them, like India never took Gandhi's advice. See, Gandhi's political ideas are rejected by India, particularly when Gandhi suggested many things to Jawaharlal Nehru and even the Constitution Assembly. Like Gandhi wanted actually to include food security and primary education in fundamental right. Ambedkar and Nehru did not agree with that. So that is the condition of Gandhi's ideas. And I don't know what Gandhi would have advised to in the Afghan condition now.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. Now, if I may, there are a few questions from the audience, the most important part of our program. Let me read out one by one, depending on the time factor. So the first question I have is from Sri Manish Sharma. His question is, Hind Swaraj was written in 1909, but till date, this book is still relevant. Then why we are not following it, as Gandhi had called the present civilization is not fit for the coming generations. And the same was confirmed by Aldous Huxley. Kindly comment on it if possible.
Yeah, I said that Gandhi's Hind Swaraj described the industrial civilization, industrial capitalism as satanic. Now, we are all part of that satanic civilization anyway. And so I was saying that Gandhi's Hind Swaraj is actually Gandhi's, my understanding. Hind Swaraj is a pacifist, anarchist manifesto. And Hind Swaraj is as significant as Marx's, or as important of Marx's Marx's and Engels' Communist Manifesto. So the Hind Swaraj, the problem is that Hind Swaraj is written by a totally decolonized mind, and also that a non-Eurocentric individual. So many people find, most of us are once colonized, we are all very Eurocentric. So our reading of Hind Swaraj, if we want to read it, we have to bracket our Eurocentric orientation. Once you bracket and look at the Hind Swaraj, as you said, is a very significant text. And Hind Swaraj asking for a stateless society. Is it possible to have a stateless society? Gandhi thought it is possible to have a stateless society, and only a stateless society could save us from this satanic civilization. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. Now I have another question here. How can we convince resistance movements across the world on the non-violent lessons of Gandhiji when such movements are faced with violent states who do not hesitate to use armed forces?
Now,
This is from Sri Milun Kothari.
See, from Gandhi's point of view, that the industrial capitalism is what has generated this kind of calamities all over the world. See, now you just think about how can you try to improve the condition without removing this satanic civilization. How to remove the satanic civilization is the problem. That the problem is not Afghanistan or some terrorist here and there. The problem is the industrial capitalism. That's the problem. And there is a nexus between industrial capitalism and the nation state and the big science. These three entities or institutions cannot exist without the other. And it's an exploitative regime which try to exploit the world and helpless people in order for their own survival. That is why Gandhi called these satanic civilization. And unless we try to reorganize our thought and we try to reconstitute our idea of the world in a different way, there is no hope for us to have a decent, civilized way of existence.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. I have another question. I have some difficulty in recognizing reading the name of of our friend who asked the question, but let me pose the question. Gandhi had asked the dismantling of Congress into Lok Seva Sangh, but it was not followed. So do you think that if this dismantling was adopted, then we would have the same politics or worse one?
I didn't get the first part of it.
Gandhi had asked for the dismantling of Congress into Lok Seva Sangh.
I got it.
But it was not done. But suppose it had been done, do you think that we would have been better off or worse off?
See, yeah, that's true. Gandhi wanted to convert Congress into an army of constructive workers. But Nehru never understood that idea. Nehru, like everybody else, like us, he was a Eurocentric person. Like Ambedkar was Eurocentric. We are all Eurocentric. And it didn't make any sense to him what was Gandhi proposing in Hind Swaraj. And he rejected Hind Swaraj. So he went for, or the Indian Constitution Assembly went for national state and as well as parliamentary democracy. and they were now trying to implement Gandhi's constructive program. A constructive program is actually, see, now you can interpret constructive program from Amartya Sen's capability thesis. Once you understand constructive program is talking about is actually a set of freedoms, freedom to eat enough, freedom to drink a glass of pure water, freedom to treat treatable diseases. Gandhi wanted to generate these freedoms, and Gandhi wanted to analyze and assess human society only in terms of these freedoms. But Congress, in the very beginning, rejected Gandhi's ideas, and asking Congress to dismantle and become constructive programs. Congress was not willing to do that. And Congress rejected that idea in 1927 itself. Nehru, after returning from Russia, told Gandhi that you are a good person, you are a saintly person, but your ideas are all insignificant. So Congress would not have accepted that point, and we cannot what you call we cannot say anything about what would have happened to India if Congress had dismantled. Sorry.
Well, it is a question like, had Cleopatra's nose been shorter, the course of world history would have been different.
I didn't get you.
Did you hear me? I was saying that, the question, contrafactual question, is a bit like Blaise Pascal saying that Cleopatra's nose, had it been shorter, the whole face of the earth would have been different.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there is another question from, I'm just trying to read it, from, just one second. It says, the whole thing is, what you have said is correct, and it almost looks hopeless. But then what shall we do now? We are where we are. I'm just paraphrasing the question because I can't read it. This is from Milun Kothari, Sri Milun Kothari. So, the situation is quite sad. So what can we do?
No, I think that there is a need for Indian intellectuals shedding the Eurocentrism and inventing political designs for South Asia, Africa, and South America. Minimally, these countries, and trying to. This is possible only if you stop looking up to Europe. And only we stop looking at Europe for ideas. We have to create ideas. And from my point of view, there was only one intellectual, real intellectual, India produced. That was Gandhi in 20th century. And if Gandhi is a model, there is a need to shed our Eurocentric orientation and then try to look at these problems in a different light. That's only solution I can think of. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. I want to ask you a historical question. As I had said in my opening remarks, some people argue that Gandhi succeeded with his non-violent philosophy in India because the British are essentially decent people. They are susceptible to appeals based on morality, Gandhi would not have even survived, let alone succeed, in Hitler's Germany. What would you say to that?
That's strange. That British is responsible for the famine which happened, Bengal famine, and the British, uh, they, in what sense they were decent people? They are one of the most indecent people the world has ever produced, and they pulverized India. India was 17th century, say about 17th, 18th century, before British came, India was a reasonably good place to live. And there was no poverty as far as I checked this. There was no poverty in a place like Kerala. And these guys came and they just pulverized India. And when they left, India's growth was below zero. And India was such a 1950s when I was young. There's in my town, Calicut, there were hundreds of what do you call lepers, hundreds of beggars, and the whole life was only very few people had an okay life. And British, we should never say anything good about this, what Gandhi called satanic civilization and its people living in that or controlling that satanic civilization. I won't say anything good about Britishers.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. Very, very firm and forthright reply. But my question is, how would it have, how would Gandhi have dealt with Hitler's Germany?
No. Hitler himself, you have to understand that the Hitler himself is a product of that satanic civilization. The only difference between Hitler and Churchill is a matter of degree, and the kind of a violence the European states done to Africa, down to South America, done to Asia. Just imagine. And Hitler, they are all various versions of Hitler. Hitler he conducted that kind of a massacre only within Europe. And just think about the massacre Belgium did in Congo, and the Europe eliminating the civilizations in South Africa. They are all various versions of Hitler. And we have to see it in that way. That's the only way we can shed our Eurocentric prejudices or biases.
Well, that is certainly the case. But nevertheless, in the case of Hitler, when we think of the Holocaust and how he treated the Jews, what could have the Jews done? Could they have practiced Gandhi's non-violence?
So Gandhi said that they should offer themselves voluntarily. That's what Gandhi said. That was a political statement. See that Gandhi thought that only if you voluntarily sacrifice your life, anyway they're going to kill you. But if you voluntarily, they will stop somewhere. And I don't know whether Gandhi advised them. That advice of Gandhi said that seriously. But what he said that the Jews should voluntarily offer to die. So it's a Gandhi would have Gandhi allowed Gandhi himself. Look at what happened to him. That the government of India was willing to provide police security. Gandhi did not accept it, and allowed one of these rabid character from Hindu Mahasabha come and kill him. He knew that they are going to do that. That's advice he gave to Jews also. you go and surrender, you go and give to yourself, to them, they will, perhaps they will kill few of you. Then after that, they will stop.
Okay. Now, do you think, Professor Shankaran, that Gandhi's philosophy can survive without another Gandhi?
Yeah, we can, Gandhi, we can all, we are all intelligent enough to rework, and we have to, see what the problem with us is that we are too much depends upon Western European ideas. I'm repeating that. Unless we stop that, there is no possibility for Asian, African, South American populations to improve their own condition. Now, we have to realize that it was Europe, it destroyed Iraq. It was America and Europe together destroyed Iraq. And what are the consequences of that? And there was in 1950s, there was a democracy, decent democracy in Iran. What happened to that? It was Churchill and Truman uh, produced a coup, military coup, and they installed Shah of Iran. All these places, when Africa, South Asia, and South America, when people try to improve their condition, these agents of what Gandhi called satanic civilization come and destroy our happiness. So, we have to consider the what Gandhi called satanic civilization. That is the industrial capitalism is our real enemy, and how to deal that non-violently is what our problem is. That our problem? How to handle this non-violently? We have to put our ideas together, and we have to shed our Eurocentrism, as I said, and jointly these countries should sit together and think and find a new way of living.
Yeah, you're quite right, Professor Shankaran. But at the same time, we have to recognize that what happens in history, what has happened in history, is that the Western civilization is marching strong, and the non-West is adopting, imitating the West in many ways. So the question is Gandhi's non-violent philosophy in opposition to the, what shall we say, the wave of history?
No, it's all history. History does not have a particular direction, and history is actually, as Marx said, we ourselves create history. So we have to find some means of stopping it. And my suggestion is that is Gandhi's suggestion is that we have to first try to become non-Eurocentric. See now, at least one text is a recent text, that is the Provincializing Europe by, I forget his name, Provincializing Europe. And that give us some suggestion, what kind of a Eurocentrism from which we are really suffer from, and how to get rid of it is an issue, is a real issue. Without we deal with that issue, there is no hope for us. We will be constantly under the threat of satanic civilization. And we have to find, there is no way of violently dealing with that. So we have to find non-violent ways of dealing with that. We have to find non-violent ways of stopping India becoming a majoritarian democracy. We have to find non-violent ways. So the violent ways of stopping Europe becoming more and more aggressive, stopping Indian democracy becoming majority in democracy. These are facts we have to deal with at the same time. So the immediate issue is that how to stop India becoming a majoritarian state, majoritarian democracy. So we had to deal that non-violently. That's an immediate issue. What are we going to do that? So given these political parties, all these political parties are they criminalize themselves, and they don't help people at all. So there should be a kind of a movement, intellectual movement, to find a solution to these difficulties. I don't have, and I don't think Gandhi has. If you read Gandhi, I don't see any particular Gandhian remedy for this. We have to find out our own way of dealing with this.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. I have one question from Sri Ankit Sharma. What Indian stroke global leader would Gandhi would have endorsed today? And if so, why?
I didn't get that properly.
Which leader, Indian or global, would Gandhi would have endorsed? And if so, why? Would Gandhi would he have endorsed any leader?
I don't see anyone. I don't see, if I speak from Gandhi's point of view, I don't see any decent political leader in any of these countries.
Okay, now let me ask you a question on, if I may. 9/11. We are in the month of September still. So 9/11 occurred 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you think Gandhi would have prescribed a different formula for responding to the terrible violence of 9/11 compared to what America has done?
See, 9/11 violence is one generated by, again, my point is same. 9/11 violence is a response to what Gandhi called satanic civilization, that is industrial capitalism. Industrial capitalism created the situations that we are facing, and industrial capitalism also created the complete destruction of West Asia. Just think about West Asia. What happened to Yemen? What happened to Iraq? What happened to Iran? What happened to Palestine? What happened to Libya? All these countries, who destroyed them? The effect of the European states' greed and their desire to have more oil for themselves, and that created the Islamic fundamentalism largely. And unless, there is no point in saying that you have to stop Islamic fundamentalism first. We have to stop these European countries trying to exploit others. That is what we have to stop first. We have to find means of dealing with them.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran. I don't see any more questions here. So,
thank you.
We thank you for an insightful presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give a big thank you applause to Professor Shankaran for his presentation on a theme of enduring importance. And you have demonstrated, Professor Shankaran, the relevance of Gandhi to today's world. Now, whether the human beings will change their behavior, well, that is a difficult question to answer. We can only hope that we who call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens would behave in a manner to earn that title which we have given to ourselves.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us sort of, all good things have to come to an end, but there will be YouTube, which those of our friends who have not been present with us in cyberspace can watch later. Let me sort of say thank you to Tete and also to our colleagues Sandeep and Naresh, who sort of helped me with the IT, which was very, very important. And ladies and gentlemen,